All right, for this explainer, we're going to be historical detectives. Our mission, to crack a case that's been cold for, well, centuries, and finally figure out the true identity of a really mysterious philosopher, Paul of Venice.
I know, it sounds pretty much impossible, right? How can a brilliant, one of the most important thinkers of his time, be completely misunderstood for over a century and a half? But believe it or not, that's exactly what happened to Paul. And we're going to dig in and find out just how everybody got it so incredibly wrong. Okay, so let's just lay out the case file. You've got the myth on one side and the reality on the other. The myth paints Paul as, just a follower. He got slapped with these labels: nominalist, like he was just a student of William Ockham, and an Averroist when it came to his psychology. But the reality? Oh, it's a completely different story. He was actually a realist, more in line with Duns Scotus. And, this is the really important part, he was an original thinker, a synthesizer who created his own unique system.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. This isn't some New Age reinterpretation. Our source, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, lays it out in black and white. For about 150 years, everyone, and I mean unanimously, believed the wrong thing about this guy. So the question is, how on earth does that happen? Well, our investigation starts right now.
Okay, to really crack this case of mistaken identity, we first need to get a lay of the land. We need to understand the philosophical battlefield Paul was navigating. And right at the center of it all was this one massive, huge debate.
So this core conflict was between two big ideas: nominalism and realism. Now, the nominalists, like Occam, the guy they thought Paul was a fan of, they believe that universals, like humanity or redness, are just names. They're just convenient labels we create in our minds. But the realists? They argued, no, humanity is a real thing, a real essence that actually exists out there in the world. And understanding this difference, well, that's our first major clue.
All right, so let's bring in our first piece of evidence, Exhibit A, and see which side of the fence Paul actually landed on.
Turns out, Paul was a die-hard realist. No question about it. He argued that these universals, these common essences, are actually found within individual things. So the humanity that makes you human and the humanity that makes me human, he'd say they're really the same thing, but they're formally distinct. Okay, I know what you're thinking. What on earth does that mean?
Well, let's break it down. It's actually a pretty cool idea. Imagine a single person. Just one substance, right? Now this person has the ability to laugh. They also have the ability to learn. The concept of being able to laugh is obviously different from the concept of being able to learn. That's what he means by formally distinct. But here's the kicker. Both of those abilities exist in one and the same person. They're materially identical. And that's his clever solution for how these big universal ideas can exist inside specific, individual things.
So, boom, we've established he's a realist. Myth number one, busted. Now let's move on to our next piece of evidence, Exhibit B, and see how this whole realist thing shapes his ideas about truth. See, for Paul, truth had to be anchored to the real world. A sentence like, say, Socrates is a man, isn't just true because the words fit together. It's true only if it corresponds to a real state of affairs out there in the world. The actual fact of Socrates being an actual man. For him, truth wasn't some language game. It had to be tied directly to reality. And this is where you can really see he's not just copying someone else's homework. He's innovating. Sure, he was influenced by this other philosopher, Gregory of Rimini, but he took Gregory's ideas and totally changed them. See, Gregory thought a true sentence pointed to some weird, abstract thing that existed outside of reality. Paul's like, no, let's simplify this. The truth just points to the thing itself. And get this, Gregory even argued that false sentences pointed to a kind of ghostly, feebler reality. Paul was much more direct. He basically said, nope, false sentences don't point to anything real. Period. He was building his own system, and it was way more grounded.
All right, the evidence is definitely mounting. He's not a nominalist, and he's clearly no mere copycat. But what about that other label they threw at him, Averroist? To figure that one out, we need to bring in our final piece of evidence, Exhibit C, his theory of how we actually know stuff.
Okay, so the standard view at the time, the one pushed by philosophical heavyweights like Thomas Aquinas, went something like this. First, our minds grasped the big general concept, like humanity, and only after that, kind of indirectly, do we get to the specific individual, like Socrates. Well, Paul comes along and just flips this entire script. He argued that our intellect grasps the universal idea and the individual thing at the exact same time. They are both, he said, primary objects of our mind. And trust me, for the time, this was a seriously radical idea.
So let's walk through his unique process of knowing something. It all starts with your senses. You see an object. Your mind then forms a mental image of it, which he calls a phantasm. Then, a part of your mind called the active intellect, you can literally think of it like a spotlight, shines on that phantasm. And right here, this is the big moment. Another part of your mind, the possible intellect, instantly understands both the universal concept, man, and the singular thing, this man, simultaneously and directly. It's like a direct line to knowing both the general idea and the specific thing in front of you.
So, there you have it. The evidence is all in. He's definitely not an alchemist. And he's for sure not an Averroist. So, let's head to the closing arguments and deliver the verdict. How does this all add up?
So why the huge 150-year-long misunderstanding? The answer is almost too simple. Paul of Venice was just too complex to be easily categorized. He didn't fit into the neat little philosophical boxes people wanted to put him in. So what did history do? It just shoved him into one anyway, slapping on whatever label was most convenient at the time.
The verdict is in, and it is crystal clear. Paul of Venice wasn't a follower. He was a master synthesizer. I mean, just look at this list of thinkers he drew from. It's a who's who of medieval philosophy. He's pulling from realists like Duns Scotus, from supposed enemies like the nominalist William Ockham, and from absolute giants like Aquinas. He wasn't just reading them, he was putting all their ideas into a giant blender and creating something totally new and his own.
And that, right there, was his true genius. He wasn't just following a path someone else had already laid out. He was a builder. He was taking bricks from all these different traditions and constructing an entirely new road for himself.
Which kind of brings this whole investigation back to us, doesn't it? The case of Paul of Venice isn't really just about some philosopher from hundreds of years ago. It forces us to look in the mirror and ask, why are we in such a rush to label complex thinkers? Why do we so often prefer a simple, neat category instead of appreciating the unique and, yeah, often messy brilliance of someone who creates something truly new?